Welcome to the News and Views podcast by the Fintech Times. Established in 2016, the Fintech Times is a global multimedia news outlet centered around the world's first leading fintech newspaper. We report on the latest and brightest ideas from the fintech world. Follow the conversation using hashtag TFC News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times.
Hi, I'm Polly Jean Harrison, features editor at the Fintech Times.
Hi, I'm Francis Bignell and I'm a journalist at the Fintech Times.
Hi, I'm Tyler Smith and I'm a journalist at the Fintech Times.
Hello, and welcome back once again to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. Tyler, Francis, thank you so much for joining me as ever. I hope you guys have been doing okay this week. How's it going?
Hi, Polly. It's great to join you guys again this week. It's been very, very busy, of course, at the Fintech Times. A lot going on at the moment. But yeah, I'm really happy to be joining the podcast today to be discussing some really interesting stories. How about you guys?
I think a lot going on is an understatement. It's been a very, very hectic week. But, we're here. We're happy to talk fintech. And I'm excited about the topics that we've brought forward today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a nice range of topics, I think, which is nice because usually we tend to accidentally pick the same kind of topics. So today is a nice little overview. But Francis, what are you bringing to the table today?
This week, I will be discussing how the Scottish National Investment Bank has backed a new ESG property technology.
Amazing stuff. And Tyler, what are you going to be talking about today?
I'm going to be talking about a recent court case in New York in regards to the creation of the world's very first NFT.
And my topic today is going to be about financial inclusion and its priorities with some expansions and partnerships in Bangladesh. But who would like to go first? Tyler, you went first last week, so Francis, it's between me and you.
I'm happy to go first.
You go ahead, take it away.
This week, like I mentioned, I'm going to be discussing an article which has come from the Scottish National Investment Bank as it's backed a new ESG property technology. The technology company in question is called Utopia, and it has received a $5 million investment to scale up and target new global markets. Among other initiatives, the Glasgow-based company intends to apply the investment in the creation of 50 new jobs, specializing in energy consumption monitoring technology accordingly. By providing real-time and actionable environmental, social, and governance data in multi-tenant buildings, Utopia is evidently one of the pioneers supporting the Scottish technology ecosystem transitioning to net zero. So figures indicate that the company's ESG technology is on track to reduce over 6,500 tons of carbon from multi-resident buildings over the next 3 years, improving ESG performance by 20% and increasing asset value by up to 5%. Utopia CEO Jonathan Burridge, I believe his name is he told the Fintech Times, "This investment will support our plans to become the number one ESG technology platform in our target markets. Data-driven transformation is essential to reducing global carbon emissions, and with the support of the bank, we can reach audiences around the world sooner." So this is quite a quick article. We did also include a case study, but I don't think necessarily that I need to delve into every single detail of this article. I think if our readers want to learn more, I highly encourage you guys to go and check it out. But I think what I wanted to really discuss with you both today was sort of how banks and financial institutions can really start to support these climate-first organizations, and if this is something that, again, we'll start to see more of in the future. Is this sort of like a one-off exception? Is this something that we're seeing because of where it's based? Is this something that tends to happen more in Scotland? Or, yeah, I just kind of wanted to get your guys' thoughts. So, Polly, I'll go to you first on this one.
Yeah, this is a really interesting story to bring to the table for sure. And me and Tyler, was it last week or was it when we were all three together? I can't remember, but we definitely talked about Scotland on a previous podcast, either last week or the week before. And I think, it's always great to see investment and obviously such big investments coming in to help scale up different companies. And especially from local companies, like we were saying before, it's always great to see investment outside of traditional fintech hubs like London and things like that. I think this is obviously a really interesting service, like the Utopia, is that how we're saying it, is providing. And, providing sort of different ESG data is obviously really crucial because at the moment it's all about data and it's all about ESG. And being, quite a prominent company in the Scottish technology ecosystem to help Scotland with its net zero ambitions, I think is really cool. And I'd love to see how this is going to play out, both obviously for the company, because obviously it's going to be a great boost for the company to help them scale up, and move into different markets, but also just in general for Scotland and how that is really going to help move along, the net zero plans, especially now, obviously, they've got their new First Minister in place, which will be interesting to see how that plays out on, the politics side of things. But just generally speaking, having not Scotland's net zero ambitions helped along with such a big investment is only going to be a good thing, right? And I think it shows that Scottish National Investment Bank is really committed to helping these targets and Scotland to achieve these targets, and just generally kind of making an impact on carbon emissions. And I think Utopia is really doing some great things within the real estate and property sector, and something that I guess it's just to keep an eye on, right? I mean, news like this is always good. We always love to see investment, especially at the moment when everything is pretty dry in the investment front when it comes to fintech. So it's great to see an investment, and it's great to see an investment in a company outside of London, and it's great to see an investment in a company that's doing some really cool things for ESG, the environment, and everything that we're all trying to do and all trying to achieve together, to sound a bit cheesy.
Yeah, no, I entirely agree, and I think like you said there at the end, working towards Scotland's net zero goals. As you were talking, I was having a little look around to see what other companies and organizations and even countries are doing towards net zero goals, and it is quite interesting to see. Well, firstly, that how much we've really covered it. I mean, I knew we looked at net zero a lot, but seeing it all in one place, it really does go to show how much of a priority it really is in the sector, and how many organizations are doing stuff to try and achieve some form of net zero, be it within their organization or being it to help a country achieve its goals, much like Utopia is here. I think what's interesting here, and perhaps it's just our nature of being the FinTech Times, and we don't always cover property and sort of real estate news, but it was really nice to see that it's not only in the financial sector that this has become a priority. And I think this article does a nice job of sort of highlighting sort of the almost unanimous attitude that there is in the ESG front, I should say, which is looking to massively help and improve the sector. So I really like this article, and I think it was a nice change of pace from what we usually see from sort of payments saying that they're going to be ESG not friendly, but prioritize ESG, I suppose. But Tyler, what were your thoughts?
Thanks, Francis. Well, I thought this was a super interesting article. First and foremost, I think Utopia have a really great product that's helping consumers directly realize the impact they are having on the environment and how they can actively progress towards achieving net zero. In terms of the Scottish National Investment Bank, I think this is a really, really good move by them. It will obviously create a lot more jobs and help to sort of position Utopia within the market. Of course, this kind of behavior from the bank is absolutely nothing new. Its current investment portfolio is valued at around £383.2 million, and its other areas of investment include a 50 million investment made into North Star Renewables, which makes like wind farms. I don't know what they're called, like at sea wind farms. I'm sure there's a more technical version for that. But of course, that's something that Scotland has really been able to place itself within. So they've got that investment. They've also made a very similar investment in the Social and Sustainable Housing Fund at £15 million. And of course, they've also ventured into the EV electric vehicle space with a Trojan Energy investment for charging points, for EV charging points. So they're really sort of specializing in achieving net zero, and that's why when I was writing this article, I fully could understand how they were demonstrating their ability to do that. I think this is a really, really strong investment. I don't think it's the last we're going to hear of the Scottish National Investment Bank. I wouldn't be surprised if they announced a very similar sort of move quite soon. But yeah, it's good news all around, really. And I think, as you said, Francis, it was just a little bit of a nice change of scene in terms of our editorial content to see more property technology, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, I think you've done a smashing job there, Tyler, sort of like just highlighting the other great things that are being done to work towards ESG and achieving greater ESG, I should say. But yeah, I think we've done sort of a good job of sort of really bringing to light all the different things that Scotland are doing, and that the sector in general is doing to work towards net zero, and sort of highlighting how important it really is within the sector. So yeah, no, I'm thoroughly enjoyed that conversation. Polly, as you guilt trip me first, I'm gonna let you sit in that a little bit longer and say, Tyler, why don't we go to you next?
Thank you, Francis. It's a pleasure to go second. So today I'm going to be discussing a new ruling that has just come out of the Southern District of New York Central Court regarding the creation of the world's very first NFT. Well, as it was regarded then as the world's very first NFT. This is the case of Free Holdings Incorporated versus Kevin McCoy and Sotheby's. And this was a super, super interesting case. We have to cast our mind back to 2014 when Kevin McCoy joined Anil Dash in creating what was then described as the world's very first NFT. The NFT was titled Quantum, and it all starts when understanding this court case. You have to understand in how it was created. It was minted, I should say, in terms of NFTs. It was minted on a very early form of the blockchain called Namecoin, which essentially uses names to authenticate a creation. And they registered the created NFT on the Namecoin blockchain. That was fine. When the NFT market began to heat up about 7 years later in 2021, McCoy, which was the central creator of the NFT, joined the auction house Sotheby's to sort of prepare the NFT for sale, and it did sell in 2021 for $1.47 million. But in preparing for that process, they actually transferred all of the metadata over onto the Ethereum blockchain. At the time, Ethereum, of course, was quite a contemporary blockchain. It still is, but I think, from what I understand, looking at the court documents, they just saw it to be a bit more of a practical and more seamless blockchain to store that data. Back to Namecoin, the situation with that is if you don't update your records every 200 to 250 days, they basically become invalid and they lapse. And that's exactly where this whole court case sort of came into being, because what happened is the Canadian holdings company, Free Holdings, recognized this lapse in the Namecoin blockchain and purchased the blocks in which the NFT was minted on originally. And basically, the whole court case, the plaintiff in this was actually anonymous, but it was taken through Free Holdings. And they basically said, we own these blocks by default because you've let your record lapse. And they were sort of arguing, well, we owned the very first NFT, which made the 2021 sale through Sotheby's invalid. Ultimately, this ended up in a Southern District of New York courtroom. It was presided over by Judge James Scott, who ultimately this week ruled in favor of the defending party, Kevin McCoy and Sotheby's, and essentially said that they still owned the rights to the very first NFT, and that basically what happened with Namecoin is when they let their records lapse, the blocks themselves weren't up for grabs. They were essentially, through want of a better term, burnt through the blockchain, so they just didn't exist anymore. Plus, the data had already been moved over to the Ethereum. So I think this will come as a great relief to Kevin McCoy, and of course Sotheby's as well. The judge really cited that that the plaintiff had failed to establish any real ownership over the NFT, which of course has now been sold. So I think it's a really, really interesting case. First of all, for its association with one of the early forms of NFTs, which I thought was really, really cool. But I think it goes further than that into realms of digital ownership, and especially how ownership is established through the blockchain. As you know, they keep records on DLTs. So I think it was sort of, the court case was very novel for its time in trying to recognize and understand exactly the chain of ownership through the NFT's creation. Do we expect to see more court cases like this in the future? Quite possibly, yes. There have been great debates over what ownership within digital assets actually looks like. But I think this was a really, really interesting case just because it highlighted all of the sort of novel issues presented with the use of such technology in this way. So yeah, I just want to get your thoughts on this. Really, do you think that we're going to be seeing more cases like this arise of ownership of NFTs? And most of them, what do you think of the ruling?
I think from what I've understood, it was the correct ruling. I don't think correct me if I'm wrong here, Tyler. So it was the original person who created the NFT that has been legitimately given credit to it. Is that right?
Yeah, Kevin McCoy. I don't know quite what the working relationship was between Anil Dash and Kevin McCoy, but I believe that it was McCoy who had sort of ownership over the main bulk of the NFT profits.
Right. Yeah, I think from what I can gather, the correct decision was made, and I think I don't know if it's sort of like a terms and conditions fine print type of thing where if you don't update these records every 200 to 250 days, as it says in the article, then the ownership can be claimed by other users. But I don't think the ownership was claimed, from what I understand at least. I think it was just duplicated, and I think that's where the sort of the issue lies, is that it wasn't something that was already created that was then being you know, laid claim to. It was something that they sort of just said, well, you didn't have ownership anymore, so we've just made a new version and claimed it to be that. I don't know. That's my understanding if of this whole thing. I might be a little bit off, but I think if that is the case, I think the correct decision definitely was, arrived at, because it just seems like Free Holdings and their defendants, the plaintiff, we're just trying to capitalize on to make a quick buck, it seems, and I don't think that's right. In terms of if we're going to sort of see something like this in the future, I think the more that NFTs have become sort of mainstay in our society, I think that's definitely something that we are going to see, whether we sort of like it or not. They're just a massive commodity now, and admittedly, yeah, the hype might have died down a bit, but that doesn't mean that they're sort of completely off the face of the earth. I don't know. I think if we're looking forward, we'll probably see some cases, probably not to this extent. But I mean, think about how many celebrities have sort of invested, and sort of how many have then been charged for misleading, their fans. I think there really is a big world where, regulations are obviously going to be needed to be introduced. This is something that we've all discussed and heard before. But at the same time, it is sort of a user awareness as well, sort of user beware. And I think the more that people become educated in NFTs and sort of blockchain technology generally, the more that we will start to see cases like these.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Francis. They did create a new NFT, but they basically came to own the blocks on which the original NFT was minted without actually realizing that the blocks themselves had become almost defunct in their facilitation of that data. But yeah, I totally agree with you. I think although the market for it has died down, could they complete a sale of this nature in today's climate? I'm not too sure, but I think it's the first of many in terms of court cases around the ownership of digital assets, and especially the ownership of digital art as well. I think it's fascinating. Polly, what's your take on this?
I agree with you, Tyler. I think it is fascinating. I'm going to preface this by saying once again that I do not understand NFTs. I just don't get it. But this was wild. This was a wild ride. I just love the idea of this poor judge having to suddenly learn what an NFT is and what blockchain is, and all that. That just tickles me. Assuming, of course, he didn't know already, but that does tickle me. I think this was just a really interesting situation, just in general. Like a court case over the ownership of the world's first NFT. Like that's very much a really interesting situation. And I think, it's one of those things where, to be honest with you, it kind of surprises me that such a court case even exists, because I thought the whole point of NFTs and the blockchain and all the rest of that is that they are ironclad records. They are immutable records on this blockchain to say who owns what, who has what. And so the fact for an NFT to be under such questionable ownership, it was really interesting to me, and kind of to my understanding of what the blockchain is. Obviously, I know that, again, my understanding is not very good. But just generally speaking, I think this is very interesting. And I did not have any clue that the first NFT was created, apparently, in 2014, because that's a long time ago, if you consider kind of the big buzz that NFTs have now. But yeah, I agree with everything Francis said, that I think it's just very much trying to get a quick buck out of this, the people who are doing the freeholdings or whatever. But again, I think it's really interesting, and I wonder if we'll see more of this in the future, and I wonder how much this case will now set a precedent to any future cases, because obviously legal precedent is quite important when it comes to sort of future court cases. So I wonder if any future court cases involving NFTs will look to this case as a precedent, which would mean it's got fairly big implications moving forward. But no, it's fascinating, isn't it? Isn't it just brilliant? A court case about an NFT. Who'd have thought? Who'd have thought?
Yes, absolutely, guys. I think it's gonna really set the precedent, as you said, Polly, and we should have to keep our eye out for any more news that comes through like this, because it would make almost a good series if there was more coming through. But all in all, I think it's the plaintiff maybe looking to make a quick buck, to be honest, and exploit a system that perhaps they themselves didn't fully understand. So who does? Anyway, Polly, maybe we should move over to your article. What are you discussing today?
Yes, finally, it is my turn once again. But no, so my article today is all about how financial inclusion is the top priority for Huawei and Bcash. Is that how you say Huawei? I butcher their name so much for fun, so now I'm not sure how to actually say the name. But anyway, so they have, following a partnership expansion, Huawei and Bcash have agreed to deepen their partnership in Bangladesh, with the aims to further drive financial inclusion and enable more people to participate in and benefit from the digital economy in the country. So Bcash is a mobile payment operator within Bangladesh, and it provides mobile financial services to 68 million people. And Huawei powers Bcash's services with its digital finance solution. It's obviously, great to see a deepening partnership. We love to see collaboration. We love to see collaboration when it means that consumers are benefited from it, especially those who may not have access to other financial services. So, like, obviously, being in Bangladesh, financial inclusion is going to be a bit more of an issue than perhaps in some other places, relatively speaking. And I think the idea of pushing financial inclusion to the forefront is always great, right? We always love hearing about it. We talk about it a lot on the podcast and just kind of in general. So the idea of having a new memorandum of understanding between the two companies to help deepen not deepen, that's the wrong word, to help better financial inclusion in the country. Amazing stuff. My question, I guess, here is sort of, we see this a lot, right? We see this headline come up a lot of XYZ company plans to make financial inclusion better. XYZ company wants to focus on financial inclusion as it's moving forward. But do you guys think that, it's all very well and good focusing on financial inclusion and saying, yes, financial inclusion is a very big priority for us, but then do we think we get the payoff from that? Do they actually bring in the financial services and the products in to help with financial inclusion? Or is it just sort of they just carry along down the road and they do the thing, and and it all just kind of happens? And I think this isn't a very good example of it, because I think there's very clear examples here of Bcash and Huawei actually doing a lot to help with financial inclusion. But it kind of just got me thinking of, financial inclusion is such a huge buzzword and we hear it so often, that do people actually know what it means, and are people actually actively trying to work towards it? Or is it just a case of that it kind of aligns quite nicely with what they're doing already, and so they're kind of just carrying on down their path while saying that they're going to be inclusive and innovative to people who don't have access to financial products. So I guess that's quite a deep cut of a question and probably a bit all over the place, but I'd love to know what you guys think about it. I mean, Francis, first of all, do you understand my question? Because I don't know if I understand it, but what do you think?
I don't know if I understood your question, first and
I don't
foremost.
think I did either.
But I definitely think that, it is a buzzword. And because of that, I think a lot of the time now, organizations are sort of saying they're working towards something sort of similar to the ESG comment really from earlier. If you're not saying it, you're probably losing out on some customers. And I feel like even if you just say we're working towards it, that sort of hits a checkbox. Is it just a checkbox, or is stuff actually being done? Well, for the most part, I think we usually see some sort of action or product or something that's going to help with financial inclusion or ESG. However, I don't think we really see long-term impact. And I especially think with financial inclusion, you really need to sort of have a wait and see approach to it. I think, sure, you can try and get everyone involved straight away, but I think one of the most important aspects of financial inclusion isn't just sort of saying, look, here, we can offer you this one-time product which will give you access to financial services. It's about saying, we're going to give you, your family, and sort of your children, your children's children, like your family line now will have access to financial services, and previously where you didn't have access, where you were excluded. I think that's where financial inclusion really plays an important role. It's about ensuring change for the future, not just an immediate impact. So yes, if I understood your question that none of us understood, I think it might just be a buzzword, but I think it'll be a case of waiting to see in time really if financial inclusion really is taken off the way it should, which is frustrating because if it isn't, there's going to be a long time before we can really sort of see that. But yeah, I think those are my thoughts.
I think you did understand my question, but to be fair, I did come here with a half-baked idea, so it's fine. But yes, I agree with you entirely. And I think there are a lot of examples of people actually doing a lot to help financial inclusion, like looking at this story with Bcash and Huawei. Bcash have been doing a lot in the space to actually help Bangladesh, like providing like nano loans and like e-wallets and things like that. So that is like a genuine example of, yes, they are helping to bring financial inclusion. I guess I just had sort of like this cynical bit in my mind of, are people actually trying to help financial inclusion, or are they just trying to get in on this sort of bandwagon? But Tyler, what do you think? Do you understand my question, or am I just going off on one?
I understand your question, Polly. I thought it was a really good analysis of the article. Is there like a financial inclusion equivalent to greenwashing? I don't know. To be honest, we see so much about financial inclusion, and I think I think as Francis and you have said, it's a very common buzzword in the industry, and it's obviously something that's going to get you a news article wherever you want to be. I'm not in saying that. I'm not going to slander off. Oh God, Huawei, I think is how you pronounce it. It's so embarrassing. Yeah, I think Huawei do have integrity to speak about financial inclusion. And I say this because although not specifically relevant to Bangladesh, when I was in Leap in Saudi Arabia back in February, the one of the chief execs of the company spoke there about how they was enabling the digital economy through the provision of the necessary infrastructures, and a byproduct or consequence, we should say, of that movement, at least in the Middle East, was that it was going to bring more people access to the financial services that they need. I think in relation to their movements with Bcash and the partnership in general, I mean, we see a lot of mobile technology being sort of the central focus of delivering these sorts of initiatives. So I do think it has substance there. I think that both companies have integrity in what they're saying, but I do think personally, having been looking at this and following this sort of topic for a long time, that companies should be quite wary of throwing around or perhaps overly trivializing the matter of financial inclusion without actually delivering in the end. Now, that's not a criticism on either party here or on the article itself, but I do think that, I'd like to see results now. Do you know what I mean? Which is sort of an echo of what you guys have said.
Yeah, you got it. You got what I was trying to say. We all got there in the end. But no, I completely agree with you, Tyler. And yeah, I think it's about the results now. We've talked about it for a long time. Let's actually see some stuff in action. But anyway, we'll leave my half-baked theory there. But thank you so much, guys, for bringing those stories to the table today. If you would like to hear any more about anything that we've discussed today or anything else from the fintech world, head on over to thefintechtimes.com, where you can read plenty more news and insights over there. But why don't we move very quickly on to what I learned this week? So each week we learn so much new information, being on the editorial team, so much across our desks at all times. So we're learning new things all the time. And we thought that'd be fun to share that with our listeners. So Francis, what have you learned this week?
So what I learned this week comes from an article which sort of is the what I learned this week, which is Canadian banks are leading the way with responsible AI principles as Europe lags behind, and this comes from research from Evident. So yeah, quite interesting.
Amazing stuff. Tyler, what did you learn this week?
Thanks, Polly. This week, I was looking at the insights from RoboCash Group, and it was specifically regarding fintech companies in Southeast Asia and their use of AI and machine learning technologies. In fact, only 3.09% of companies, which is about 107, it's about 807 companies out of 26,000 companies are using these technologies. However, that figure is increasing. It currently sits at 3.09. It was 3.03 back in 2021 and 2.88 back in 2020. So there's a lot of development to be done there, but still promising growth is happening. What about you, Polly?
Amazing, thank you, Tyler. And yeah, what I learned this week was that 8.8% of UK households missed or defaulted bill payments in March 2023, which was found by Which. And obviously that was like a really big number, but I honestly thought it would be more. And I guess that's my takeaway from this. I suppose when you categorize something as a percentage, it always looks smaller than it is. But that is 2.5 million households, which is obviously a huge figure and not great. But anyway, that brings us to the end of the podcast. Once again this week, thank you so much, Tyler and Francis, for joining me. It's been a pleasure to speak to you all about fintech, and yeah, hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, guys. I'll see you next week.
Always a pleasure. See you guys next week.
Thanks for listening to the News and Views podcast by the Fintech Times. Don't miss next week's episode and continue the conversations using hashtag TFT News and Views, and follow us at the Fintech Times.